Welcome to the very first episode of On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host Newsome, and on this new podcast I'll be providing quick fire breakdowns of all the fights on the UFC event, giving my prediction of who will win each fight. But the spice on this podcast is that I'll be talking more in depth about the betting lines of each fight, including where the value is with each fighter's odds too. I hope you all enjoy the podcast. As a team at MMAPlay365, we'll also be providing a lot of fun content for you all moving forward, such as video content in our office that we're currently setting up, fighters breaking down fights, insights into betting MMA, along with free giveaways and competitions too. So I'd honestly appreciate it a lot if you guys dropped a like to this video and subscribe to the new channel. But for now, let's talk UFC 249, and in the main event we've got a violent one for the UFC Interim Lightweight Championship. We've got Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje. Tony Ferguson currently sitting at a minus 165 favourite, with the comeback on Justin Gaethje at plus 145. Now I'm going to start with the betting lines first. I do think they're roughly around where they should be. I think there's value on Tony Ferguson at minus 165. There is an argument that he could be closer to minus 200, but I actually think the betting line sinks a little bit for Tony Ferguson as the fight week goes along. I think we see more money coming on Justin Gaethje, which, to be honest with you, I think is warranted in some respects, because Justin Gaethje is a dog fighter just like Tony Ferguson. He'll fight for your money. So at plus 145, I do definitely see some money coming in on Justin Gaethje. But as you can already tell, I do favour Tony Ferguson for this fight. I think that 5 rounds definitely favours him. I think that if he can get out sort of 1.5 minutes of this fight without getting knocked out by Gaethje, I think the longer this fight goes on, the more it does favour Tony Ferguson. So I think that in a long fight, Ferguson takes it. Justin Gaethje can definitely win this fight, but I just feel that Gaethje's window of opportunity is relatively small. Like I say, I think he's got to get him out of there sort of within the first 1.5 rounds, because Justin Gaethje, people will say, and rightly so, that his game has developed a little bit since coming into the UFC, and he was going all guns blazing, and he was getting tired out, and he was taking some bad beatings, and he's become a lot smarter with the way he fights. But a lot of these fights were coming against fighters where he was allowed to pressure. He was allowed to be the one dictating the pace of the fight. He was the one landing shots, going first in the striking exchanges. But this fight's going to be completely different. Tony Ferguson isn't going to allow that. Ferguson's going to be in the face of Gaethje. He's going to likely be the one pushing Gaethje back. He's going to be the one forcing the pace of the fight, dictating where the fight goes. And I feel that in that type of fight, Justin Gaethje is going to have a different fight than what he has for his last few. He's been bombing people. He's knocked Vic out. He's knocked Cerrone out. He knocked Barboza out. So the dude's on good form. But like I say, these are all different fighters than what Tony Ferguson is. And I think when he's the one moving backwards, when he's the one not going first, when he's the one being the person that the pressure's being put on, it's just a different fight for Justin Gaethje. And I do think that there's a strong likelihood in this fight that Gaethje actually goes back to the way he fought when he first came into the UFC, because, like I say, he hasn't got that time to dictate the pace. He hasn't got that time to get the reads on Tony Ferguson. He can definitely win this fight. He's got to chop the legs down of Tony Ferguson, and I just think he's got to get Ferguson out of there, because if I'm right, and Gaethje is or does turn into the fighter that he was when he first came into the UFC, I just feel that he's going to end up getting tired sort of halfway through the second round, maybe the start of the third round. And when you're looking into the championship rounds, if it goes there, I feel that if the fourth and the fifth round is going to be won by Tony Ferguson, I don't see him losing those 2 rounds. So if there's no knockout or a finish in this fight, I think as long as Ferguson wins 1 round out of the first 3, which is absolutely a high possibility outcome, I think he takes the fight. I didn't really talk too much about the ground game. I don't think this fight's won and lost on the mat. I wouldn't be totally shocked if we saw the fight hit the mat at some point, but unless there's some sort of flash submission, I think this fight's going to stay standing. I think Tony Ferguson's got the better technical strike, and I think he's going to be the one pushing the pace. I don't think Gaethje's going to like it, so I've got Tony Ferguson winning this fight. And in the co-main event of the evening, we've got a bantamweight championship on the line. We've got Henry Cejudo defending his belt against the returning Dominick Cruz. Now, we've not seen Dominick Cruz in the cage for a long time, since he lost his title to Cody Garbrandt, so it's nice to see him back inside the cage. Henry Cejudo is currently sitting as a minus 230 favourite, with the comeback on Cruz, the challenger, at plus 190. Now, I don't see any value in those money lines right now. I could potentially see value in the near future, and that's purely because I think Cejudo's price is going to come down. I think minus 230 is way too high. There is a lot of uncertainty with Dominick Cruz, but you can talk about that uncertainty each way. However, I will get into that shortly, but I just feel from a betting line perspective, it is dog or pass in a sense right now, but I do think Cejudo's going to win the fight. I do favour him to win. However, I do think that line is going to come down. I think we're going to see it lower than minus 200 come fight week, maybe fight night. And I think that value will then shift onto Cejudo completely. But as I've already mentioned, I favour Cejudo to win the fight. I feel that, like I say, there is a lot of uncertainty with Dominick Cruz. What's he going to come back like? The last time we saw him, he lost to Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt, of course, has been knocked out 3 times since that fight. He obviously lost his bantamweight championship as well. The fight after he won it, so he didn't defend it. Those signs don't really look good for Dominick Cruz because Cruz ultimately made Garbrandt look like a world beater in that fight. And like I say, Garbrandt going on to losing his championship the fight after and then subsequently getting knocked out in his last 3 fights, it's not really a good look. But if any fighter can come back after a long period of time and look good, it's someone like Dominick Cruz. He's got that unorthodox movement, that movement that fighters really struggle to figure out. Only one fighter in the UFC really did, and that was Garbrandt, who absolutely schooled him on the night. Can Cejudo make those reads? Can Cejudo cope with that unorthodox movement? Now, I actually think that it's going to bamboozle Cejudo a little bit inside the cage, especially early on. But I feel that Cejudo can work himself into the fight. He might lose round 1, he might even lose round 2. But I think that Cejudo's not going to give Cruz the time to really get anything off. I think he's just going to have to really focus on figuring that movement out of Dominick Cruz before he really starts putting the pressure. But that's when I think the pressure's going to come on. I think Cejudo at some point in the fight is going to start making his reads, is going to start finding his timing. He is going to start landing some vicious low kicks, which we've seen in his last few fights. Once his low kicks start landing, he can then start setting up other attacks. He can then start setting up his hands, getting combinations going, just landing on Dominick Cruz. He's got the threat of a takedown there, obviously, as an Olympic level wrestler. That Olympic wrestling has also bridged very well into mixed martial arts, which is the key factor when you're talking about a wrestler outside of MMA coming into MMA. So Cejudo's really put it all together, and he is looking like one of the best fighters on the planet right now, which he is. And I just feel that I don't think he's going to spend too much time on top of Cruz. I think takedowns will be there, but like I say, I struggle to see Cejudo holding Cruz down for long periods of time. Cruz is going to be the bigger man as well, so he is going to be able to spread his legs. He's going to be able to get his underhooks in. Everybody knows Cruz loves an underhook, and I just feel that he's going to be able to stuff some of the takedowns. But I feel that these takedowns will be threats. I think Cejudo will get him down from time to time, but it's all just tools to make Cruz be thinking of what's coming next. Is he going to be thinking of the low kick? Is he going to be trying to set up a combination? Is he going to be trying to defend a takedown? I really think that Cejudo mixes everything well up inside the cage. I do think it's going to be a close decision, but I favour Henry Cejudo, and I think he'll remain the bantamweight champion. And in the next fight in the UFC heavyweight division, we've got an absolute banger here. We've got Francis Ngannou versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Ngannou currently sitting as the minus 275 favourite with the comeback on Rozenstruik at plus 235. Now this line I think is about right. You can't play it straight with Ngannou. The line's too wide for a heavyweight fight in regards to playing a straight bet. If we were looking at sort of minus 225, minus 200, it'd be a different scenario. But I think Francis Ngannou is rightly the favourite in this fight, but it's a little bit too steep to play straight. As for the fight itself, as you might be able to guess, I do favour Ngannou to win the fight. Rozenstruik has that kickboxing background. I've mentioned it previously in the past on previous podcasts. And, when I went back and watched tape on Rozenstruik, I watched his entire career, well, what was available of it anyway, pre-UFC, but in MMA. And I was expecting to see this really solid kickboxer with crisp, sharp attacks, speed, movement. I was expecting to see the kickboxing credentials transfer into MMA, put it that way, but I was a little underwhelmed actually after I watched the tape on Rozenstruik. I just feel that I don't know, maybe I was expecting more from him with this credential kickboxing background, but I didn't really see it too much. And actually, when you watch the fight with Overeem, Overeem was winning that fight. Obviously Rozenstruik won in the last few seconds with the big knockout blow that split Overeem's lip, but I don't feel that there was there was any sort of striking technique advantage for Rozenstruik in that fight. And I know Overeem is a better technical striker than Ngannou as well, and I just feel in this fight, from a technique perspective in the striking, I don't think that any of these fighters is going to be head and shoulders above the other. One might turn out to make the reads and be the sharper fighter on the night, but from both fighters pre-fight, I don't think there's going to be a huge gap in skill on the feet. However, it comes down to power and who lands first. I do think Francis Ngannou has got a decent chin on him. I'd be surprised if, he was knocked out by Rozenstruik in a fashion. I know it's heavyweight. I know Rozenstruik, it's hard. But I think the fighter that lands first in this fight is going to be the fighter that ultimately wins. And when I say lands first, I mean a good, clean shot. I just see Francis Ngannou landing on Rozenstruik. I don't know when it'll be. I think it potentially could be early on in the fight. But I just see Ngannou landing something hard on Rozenstruik. And I just don't think any heavyweight can survive a good, hard, clean shot from Ngannou. I know he didn't knock Miocic out, but he didn't hit Miocic with a clean flush shot. Miocic prepared really well for that fight from a defensive striking perspective. I think that Rozenstruik is going to be, he might be a little difficult to figure out for the first couple of minutes, but I think when they start exchanging, Ngannou's going to land something, and I think he's going to knock him out. So I'm taking Francis Ngannou in this fight. And in the next fight, we've got another fun one. We've got Jeremy Stephens versus Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar currently sitting as a minus 240 favourite, with the comeback on Jeremy Stephens at plus 200. Now, from a betting line perspective, it's really a strange one right now, because I do feel that the value is on the underdog with Jeremy Stephens at plus 200. I think that's a really good price for someone that is going to fight for your money, for someone that is a dog fighter. However, the line does seem to be shifting a little bit, and again, rightly so. I think the line's too wide right now. So I think at some point that value might shift from the dog to the favourite. I think if Calvin Kattar sort of gets better than minus 200, maybe hits minus 180, minus 190, I think the value is going to shift onto Calvin Kattar at that point. But right now, the value is definitely on the dog at plus 200. However, as you can maybe sort of guess, I am leaning towards Calvin Kattar in this fight as a pick. Kattar's got some really crisp boxing. He's got a wrestling background to back that up with as well. We don't really see too much of it, but he definitely has got it. He's got good takedowns, good top control, but on the feet is where he really impresses me the most. He's got nice hands, quick, sharp boxing, good jab, uses his jab a lot, doubles up on it. And any fighter that in MMA that's got good boxing skills and can double up on a jab, it sets that right hand up so much. And you saw that in the Lamas fight as well. Kattar was tipping him with a jab, and then suddenly the right hand came and floored him. So, Calvin Kattar's striking is very, very good. Now, from his weaknesses, from what I've seen is, and this is a big one as well, and I think this is a good path to victory for Jeremy Stephens. Kattar's weakness is his lead leg. So he stands in an orthodox stance. His lead leg is there to be kicked all day long. Shane Burgos nearly came back to beat him in that fight before he was knocked out. Burgos lost the first round, but then he started finding a home for the low kick, started landing that low kick. Then his combinations came off the low kick, and then suddenly started to get back in the fight. He won round 2, in my opinion. Round 3, it was close up until the knockout. So Burgos nearly or could have pulled a comeback in that fight by that low kick. Then you go and look at the Renato Moicano fight. Moicano destroyed Kattar over 3 rounds, predominantly with the low kick. Absolutely smashed his calves to bits, to the point where Kattar really was struggling to move. He was starting to tire, and Moicano just poured it on from there. And even when you look at the Zabit Magomed Sharipov fight, that leg was, I was watching that fight, and that leg was there to be kicked over and over. Zabit didn't take it, really probably didn't need it, looking at the fight as a whole, but it was there to be hit, and that's the point. Jeremy Stephens has added low kicks to his game sort of within the last few years. Not seen too much of it in the last few fights, so, and this is where I'm a little bit unsure, because if Stephens can come in this fight and really use his low kick as a primary attack and then come to set things up from that low kick, then he's going to beat Calvin Kattar, because Kattar does slow down a little bit late in fights. And if he has that leg beat as well and he really starts struggling with the movement, his attack, his boxing, where he's really, really strong, that's not going to be as crisp. It's going to be a little bit slower. The power's going to be reduced a little bit as well. And from there, Stevens can start having a lot of success. So for me, I think the fight really lies on whether Stevens can get off on this leg kick or not. If he doesn't, though, I just think he's going to get beat. At that point, he's going to have a puncher's chance. Yes, he could knock Kattar out, just like he could knock anybody out, but you have to favour Kattar if those leg kicks just aren't in Stevens' game plan. The hands are too quick, he's too sharp, he's too good inside the pocket, he'll rip the body as well. We've seen Jeremy Stevens dropped him a couple of times with body shots, so it wouldn't surprise me if Kattar dropped him with a body shot. But yeah, like I say, it's really on whether Stevens brings this leg kick to the party or not. I'm going to favour Kattar in this fight. I just feel that he's got more paths to victory. If he needs the takedown as well, I think he's the more likely the one to shoot a takedown and spend some time on top. So I'm going to take Calvin Kattar to win this fight. And in the next fight, in the heavyweight division again, we've got Greg Hardy versus Yorgan De Castro. Greg Hardy currently sitting at a -185 favourite, with the comeback on De Castro at +160. Now, from a betting line perspective, De Castro, there's value on the dog for me here. I don't think Greg Hardy should be a -185 favourite. I know he's been making improvements and he will continue to make improvements as well. But bear in mind, he's not going to have much of a training camp, just like most fighters on this fight card. And I think someone still quite as green as what Hardy is, I think he really needs these training camps more than anybody else, because he's still growing in this sport, he's still learning this sport, and without a full training camp with a lot of guys surrounding him, I just feel that he might suffer in this fight. So at -185, I don't think Hardy should be that high, and I think the value's on the dog with Yorgan De Castro. And for the reasons mentioned, along with some other that I'll explain in just a second, I do favour De Castro to win this fight, because I think that his style is going to pose a problem for Greg Hardy. And again, just like I mentioned with Jeremy Stevens a minute ago, I think De Castro really has to get off on his leg kicks. He's got a really, really hard leg kick. He finished his fight in the Contender Series with a brutal leg kick, and it wasn't as if there was an accumulation of them. You know, there was one or two, but it was brutal how he put him down with a solid leg kick. And I think if he can slow Hardy down, then he can really start to capitalize on moving forward, Hardy moving back. Hardy's definitely one of the types of fighters that likes to move forward, that thrives off being the aggressor, thrives off trying to bully his opponent inside the cage. You know, he's a physical specimen, he's athletic. So Hardy is definitely that type of fighter that likes to push forward. However, if he's being pushed back, I think he'll start to tire. He'll tire quickly. The combinations will start coming from De Castro. The strikes will start to land on Hardy. Eventually, it would be bad news for Hardy, but De Castro's just got to be careful in the early stages of this fight. You know, keep safe. Don't do anything stupid. Don't over commit yourself to anything hard. He still hits hard. He's still going to come in there to scrap for sure. He has been making improvements. He wasn't totally embarrassed by somebody like Alexander Volkov, who's one of the best in the division and a good technical striker as well. I did think that if Hardy didn't knock Volkov out, it would have been a complete whitewash, and I thought that Hardy in that situation would have been, like I said, made to look a little bit daft inside the cage, but that wasn't the case at all, which shows clear improvements to me in the technique of Hardy. So De Castro's got to be a little bit careful, but if he gets off on those low kicks early on, I think he's going to have a lot of success. And unlike Stevens, I do think that De Castro really values that low kick of his, and I think he will use it to his advantage, especially when he's going to be the shorter fighter, the fighter with the shorter reach as well. So I think De Castro's going to get off on that leg kick early. I think he's going to hurt Hardy, be able to push him back. He's going to tire Hardy out, and at that point, it should be cruise control for Yorgan De Castro. So I'm going to take De Castro to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got two veterans. We've got Donald Cerrone versus Anthony Pettis 2. Anthony Pettis currently at -135, and the comeback on Cerrone at +115. Again, just like the previous fight, I think the value is on the dog in this fight. Cerrone, I think, probably should be the favourite, which for reasons that I'll explain soon. So I do see the lines closing up a little bit. I could potentially see them going into the fight as a pick'em. I think that would be fair as well. Personally, I'd line Cerrone at -125. Like I say, I do think he should be the favourite. So yeah, the value on the dog for me. From the fight perspective, I just feel that Donald Cerrone's got more in the tank at this point from a mental perspective and a physical perspective as well. And it's a little bit of a shame for me to say this, and it does hurt for me to break this fight down in this way, because I've been a lifelong fan of Anthony Pettis. I love his style. I had a similar style when I was training martial arts. So, he was somebody that I looked to, and he really inspired me. So it's a real shame to see Pettis in the stage that he's at, because his ability, his skills haven't deteriorated. They're still there. He's still got a solid ability. He's still quick. He's still, powerful. He can still win fights. But the problem that Pettis has had over the last few fights is he keeps breaking, whether it be mentally or physically. He's broken his foot. He's broken his hand. He's broken his ribs. And at this point, you're almost watching the fight and thinking, well, what's he going to break next? And these are fights where he's had full camps. So he's not going to have had a full camp this time, and it just makes me question, is he going to be able to get through potentially 15 minutes of this fight without injuring himself? And that's from the physical perspective. What really worries me about Anthony Pettis is, in his last fight against Carlos Diego Ferreira, it looked like he tapped suspiciously quickly to Ferreira. I'm not saying the choke wasn't hard, it wasn't under the chin, it was across his face, it was more of a neck crank than a rear naked choke, but he tapped very quickly, and it just makes you wonder, did he mentally just break inside the cage? And I'm not gonna talk bad about any fighter and how they react in those positions, because I'm not in those positions, but I'm just looking from the outside looking in, and it didn't look great. Against Nate Diaz, there was moments in that fight where he looked like he had mental lapses, giving his back to Diaz against the cage, dropping down onto his butt onto the mat and letting Diaz get a hold of him, sink his hooks in, take his back. There was multiple moments in that Diaz fight where you just thought, why has Pettis just done that? This is a guy who's a veteran. And yeah, like I say, I'm having a lot of concerns with Pettis and what he's going to be like moving forward. Donald Cerrone's no spring chicken either. He's a guy that's been beaten in his last 3 fights, finished in his last 3 fights. But listen, he wasn't finished by strikes with Tony Ferguson. He stupidly blew his nose in between rounds. His eye blew up and the fight got stopped. Yes, he was knocked out against Justin Gaethje, but Gaethje's been bombing everyone, like I spoke about earlier on. Yes, he got knocked out by Conor McGregor, but listen, Conor McGregor would knock most fighters out in the UFC, in the lightweight division. So, like I say, it's a veterans fight, and I just think, even though Cerrone's on a 3-fight losing streak, I still feel that he's not over the hill just yet. I still think he's got fights in him. I think he's got more to give in this fight. I don't think it's going to be an explosive fight like the first one potentially could have been if it wasn't for the stoppage, but I just feel it's going to be a really technical fight. I like Cerrone to push forward, to pressure. Pettis doesn't like pressure, but it's not going to be fast-paced pressure. It's going to be with sniping shots. Cerrone seems to have gotten a little bit smarter, fighting that veteran style, similar to Junior Dos Santos. When Dos Santos was getting a little bit older, his explosiveness started to calm down a little bit, so he started to tune up his technique. Cerrone's taken that sort of standpoint with his striking. I just feel like Cerrone's got more in this fight. So like I say, I value on the dog, and I think Donald Cerrone's going to win the fight. And in the next fight, this is personally my favourite fight of the night. We've got Alexey Oleynik versus Fabricio Werdum. Werdum currently the minus 310 favourite, with the comeback on Oleynik at plus 255. And again, just like the previous 2 fights I've broken down, I do think the value's on the dog in this fight with Alexey Oleynik. It's going to be a good fight. I'm hoping there's going to be a lot of great jiu-jitsu in it. I hope it doesn't end early or stay on the feet. I'm really excited for this fight from a jiu-jitsu perspective. But yeah, I think minus 310 for Fabricio Werdum is ridiculous, considering he's coming off a long layoff, USADA, suspension, and then obviously the coronavirus, the training camp being limited. He's starting to look a little old. I think minus 310 is a little bit too high. I do get why he's favoured, but it shouldn't be that high. Value on the underdog for me. I like Oleynik in this fight for the reasons that I've just mentioned. Verdum's been off for quite a while. USADA suspension. Then we've had the coronavirus. He can't have really been training too much in this period. Looking at his Instagram, I haven't seen anything of him training. I'm not saying that means he hasn't been training. He might have been training and over this suspension and not been posting about it, but I haven't seen it, which concerns me. And like I say, I've seen clips of him within the pandemic that we're currently in right now of hitting pads. The dude does look a little bit older than what he did the last time we saw him, so I wonder if that's going to catch up with him. Obviously, like I've just said with Donald Cerrone, Alexey Oleynik's no spring chicken either. He's an old guy. I think from a striking perspective, if Verdum's sharp, I think Werdum's going to be the better striker. I think he might be the better striker even if he's not sharp, to be honest. Oleynik's striking's not that great, but he will bomb, he will move forward because he doesn't care if he gets taken down. I mean, this is a guy that Ezekiel chokes heavyweights whilst they've mounted him. They're on top of him in mount and he's submitting them. So this is a guy who's not scared to go to the floor. And this is where I think the fight is going to go. I think the fight at some point is going to hit the floor. I think we are going to see some scrambles whilst they're moving down to the mat and one of them's trying to settle the other one. I think we are going to see some sweeps and reversals. And I think that we can see Oleynik get on top of Werdum in this fight, especially if Oleynik's the one shooting takedowns. And if he can get Werdum on his back, I'd trust Oleynik more on top than what I would with Werdum on top. I think if Werdum's on top, he's still going to have success. He's still a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but Oleynik's just a different level. And I feel that if this is the first round and Werdum gets on top, I think Oleynik can find his way out. I think in regards to gas tank, I'd favour Werdum to have the better gas tank than Oleynik. So if Werdum can take this fight into deep waters and really start putting it on Oleynik, that's where he'll start taking over. But I just like Oleynik's chance in this fight. He's not going to be as raw as what I think Werdum's going to be, obviously with the layoff. I think he's going to be able to come forward. I think he's going to be able to try and bomb Werdum. I actually trust Oleynik's chin more than I trust Werdum's chin as well. So I think if Oleynik can land a harder punch on Werdum, I think Werdum could be dropped. I just see more paths to victory for Oleynik in this fight. I don't think it's going to be easy for him. And if Werdum does come out and start taking him down right off the bat and spending time on top, then that's when we're going to see Werdum win the fight. I think whoever spends time on top most early on in this fight is probably going to win it. I'm going to take the dog. I'm going to take Alexey Oleynik to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got Carla Esparza versus Michelle Waterson. Carla Esparza currently a minus 155 favourite with the comeback on Michelle Waterson at plus 135. And I think the value from a betting perspective is currently on Esparza, but only marginally. And it does seem like more and more money is coming in each day on Carla Esparza, pushing the line a little bit wider. I think if it does move much further though, then that value is going to shift onto the underdog because I could potentially see a relatively close fight. I don't think the line should be any higher than minus 160 in this fight. If it does, then like I say, the value will push onto the underdog in Michelle Waterson. But I do favour Carla Esparza to win the fight. I think takedown's going to play a big part. One key factor for me is Waterson hasn't fought many wrestlers in her UFC career, which is a bit crazy to think. She's not fought the Tatiana Suarez's, she's not fought the Jessica Andrade, obviously she hasn't fought Carla Esparza, she's not fought the strong wrestlers in the division. So we're really going to see how Waterson deals with this type of fighter. But when you look back at Waterson's previous fights, you can see examples of her getting taken down. So she was stuck under Felice Herrig. And this is Felice Herrig, she's not the same wrestler or jiu-jitsu fighter as what Carla Esparza is. But Waterson was stuck under her and, Felice Herrig didn't really do anything on top. The referee stood them up. But, Waterson was landing elbows from bottom. That's all I can really give her. But aside from that, she wasn't trying to escape. She didn't look like she had any room for escape, and she was in the middle of the octagon as well. Now, we've seen Waterson taken down against the cage. She's good at using the cage to get back up to her feet. But with Carla Esparza, she shoots really good blast reactive double leg takedowns. And these tend to land in the center of the octagon, opposed to being at the edge of the cage where, Waterson would be able to use that cage to stand back up. So in open space, I think Esparza is going to be able to have a lot of success on top. I think Waterson's going to be trying to scramble to her feet. She may get up once or twice, but I just feel the takedowns will keep coming from Esparza. The other side to this is I actually think that overall, when you look at it from the outset, Waterson's got the better striking, but a lot of her attacks come with kicks. Now, these kicks do slow down over the rounds, and the last thing you want to do with a good wrestler is start kicking at them because they'll use that leg to grab it, take you down. They'll counter it with takedowns. So if you then take the kicks out of that equation from Waterson, I then think Carla Esparza is the better striker because Esparza can kick Waterson. Waterson hasn't really got too much of a takedown threat. She has got a good head and arm throw. It's not something it's not a technique that should be used too often. It can leave you in bad positions, but Waterson uses the head and arm throw really well. Probably one of the best fighters to do it in the UFC. But apart from that, she hasn't really got a takedown threat. So Esparza can use her legs. But I think Esparza's boxing's got a lot better. And I think her boxing is better than Waterson's boxing, which it could end up being a boxing fight for long periods of time if Waterson doesn't kick. So again, I do think Esparza's got more paths to victory in this fight. I think she is the better fighter, but it's going to be one of these fights that Waterson is going to have her moments. Waterson might have the bigger moments. So, Esparza might have a lot of moments, but if the bigger moments are coming from Waterson, that's going to make the fight closer. If a big head kick lands, if a big front kick lands, if Esparza starts tiring, it's all going to be, the big actions that will reflect in the judges' eyes. But I do favour Esparza to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Uriah Hall versus Ronaldo Jacare Souza. Jacare is currently sitting as a -120 favourite with the comeback on Hall at +100. Now, I feel that the values on Jacare in this fight is a slight favourite. I don't think there's a ton of value in it, but I do think the value is on Jacare right now. It's going to be a close fight. I can definitely see why the lines come back in. Jacare was up at -150 at one point. The money's coming on a Hall, really closed the line. So I do get it, but I think from a skills perspective, which I'll explain very shortly, I do think that Jacare's got the value. And as you can guess, I think Jacare is going to win the fight. I do favour him to beat Uriah Hall, but it's going to be a close fight because Uriah Hall's striking is so dynamic, it's fast. Doesn't come in too many combinations though, and in too much volume, but his striking is definitely better. He's got a good straight right down the pipe. I could definitely see that punch landing on Jacare and potentially knocking him out. And he's also got a very quick spin back kick to the head, which he's hurt multiple opponents with in the past. I could see something like that happening. Even if Jacare blocks it, that's still going to rattle the head. It's still going to hit him hard. So I think the Hall has got some really, really powerful weapons that he can use against Jacare. But I just trust Jacare in this fight to close the distance, get a hold of Hall. You look at Hall's last fight against Antonio Carlos Jr., Shoeface, the amount of times that he allowed himself to get clinched up against the cage is a bit of a worry in this fight. Also, the positions that Carlos Jr. took against Uriah Hall on the mat, and Hall managed to get back up. I don't foresee that if that was Jacare on top of Hall in those positions, that Hall would just be able to stand back up. I think Jacare would punish Hall in those situations. Hall did win that fight. I just think that if Jacare gets in those positions that Carlos Jr. got against Hall, that he's going to punish him and put him away. I don't think that Carlos Jr. is a better grappler than Jacare. I think Jacare is arguably the better striker than Carlos Jr. as well. So I do see that this is going to be a very similar fight stylistically to Hall's last fight, except Jacare is the better opponent. The worry is, the danger is that I think Carlos Jr. is more durable than what Jacare is right now. Jacare is obviously getting on a little bit in age. He's a veteran, so I think Hall could take advantage of that. And that's where the fight is very close, because up until they do clinch up and there's a takedown, it's going to be Hall on the feet. And if Hall starts landing hard, it's going to make Jacare very hesitant to come forward. But I do think Jacare does come forward. I do think he gets hold of him. I do think he gets him down to the mat, and I think he'll submit him. So I'm going to take Jacare to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got another rematch. We've got Vicente Luque versus Niko Price. The first fight was really fun, and I expect this fight to be fun as well. Vicente Luque currently the -260 favourite, with the comeback on Niko Price at +220. And I actually think the value is on the dog at this price. I think that the line's too wide. I do understand why Luque's favourite. I do think that the line will come down a little bit. There will be money on Niko Price at +220. Just like I mentioned with Jeremy Stephens earlier, Niko Price, a dog, he'll fight for your money. And, if you bet against Niko Price, which I've done in the past, he makes you very nervous betting against him, because he's got power, he's got a good chin, he's explosive, but, he can be put away as well. I think the value's on Niko Price at +220, though. It wouldn't surprise me if the line kept on coming in on Luque, and then that may shift that value, like I've mentioned in previous fights on this podcast. But right now the value's on the dog. I do favour Vicente Luque to win the fight, though. Like I said, I just don't think he should be that high of a favourite. I think Luque is still the more complete fighter. I think his striking's technical, he hits hard, he's got a really good ground game. Remember, a lot of people know him for his striking, but this is a grappler turn striker. First and foremost, he's got good submissions and he's very dangerous on the mat. But in recent performances, since they last fought, we'll go from there. So since they last fought, I feel that Luque has plateaued a little bit. I was really high on him, and I thought he was really going to make some big moves into the division, maybe even hit the top 5, definitely hit the top 10, and really start flourishing in the rankings. But like I say, I do feel he's plateaued a little bit. The Mike Perry fight was close. He got absolutely out styled on by Wonderboy. I don't really hold that too much against him because Wonderboy is that type of fighter that will style on a lot of fighters outside of the top five. But I feel that he's plateaued a little bit. And although Niko Price hasn't really looked absolutely phenomenal since their last fight, I do feel that he's better. He's better now than what he was when they last fought. So that's where I think that why the line should be a lot closer. But ultimately, I think Luque's got more tools. I think they both hit hard, but Luque's got the more technique. I think he's got a ground game. He's got takedowns if he needs it. He's just got more ways to win this fight. So I do understand why Luque's favoured, and I do think he wins this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Bryce Mitchell versus Charles Rosa. Bryce Mitchell currently a -175 favourite with the comeback on Rosa at +155. And I feel that with this line, again, the value is on the underdog with Charles Rosa at +155. I like Mitchell. I think he's a great fighter. But in this spot, I just think it's going to be trickier than maybe a lot of people think for Bryce Mitchell in this fight. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park for reasons I'll explain shortly. But I do see the line coming in quite a lot closer to fight week, fight night. And at that point, the value may switch over to Mitchell. But like I say, with the current line, the value's on the underdog, the value's with Charles Rosa. I do favour Mitchell to win this fight, though. I think that it is going to be tricky, but he's going to be able to get the job done. Now, from a striking perspective, Charles Rosa's a little bit weird, but he switches between technical striking and a karate stance. He's not so good in the karate stance. He throws a lot of side kicks to the head, which don't really cause too much damage. They can put your opponent off, but they're not that effective. And like I say, if he stuck to his technical striking, I think he'd be a much better striker, but he does switch between the two, which is definitely a concern. But on the mat, Rosa is very, very tricky. I think Bryce Mitchell is going to try and take him down. I think he is going to take him down. I think Rosa might stuff a couple. I think Rosa might shoot for a takedown. I think this fight is going to be won and lost on the mat. They're both okay strikers. They're both good grapplers. Again, Mitchell is hard to really pin down. The problem is when you can pin him down, when he is flat on his back, he does really then start to look for submissions off his back opposed to escaping, sweeping, reversing or standing back up. And that's a real problem for Mitchell. He should be focusing on that when he's on his back because it's very unlikely, especially in this fight, that he's going to pull off a triangle or an armbar against such a seasoned grappler like Charles Rosa. And this is where I think the fight's tricky because if Mitchell's on top, he's got to make sure he's not making any mistakes. If he's heavy on top and he works properly and he maintains discipline and doesn't try to rush for anything, I think he can actually spend a lot of time on top because Rosa is also that type of fighter that prides himself on his submission. So he will be trying to use arm bars and triangles and to maybe sweep reverse or submit Bryce Mitchell. So I actually think that whoever's on top for the majority of this fight will win. And I know that's a bit of a cliche. Fighters can win on the bottom. Look at Neil Magny against Johnny Hendricks. But I just think whoever's on bottom is just going to be trying to work submissions and trying to pull off that submission. And ultimately, it's going to cost them the fight. I just think that's going to be Charles Rosa in this spot. So I think Bryce Mitchell's going to win. And finally, the newest fight on the card, actually a fight that the UFC have rebooked. We've got Ryan Spann versus Sam Alvey. Ryan Spann currently sitting as the biggest favourite on the card at -380 with the comeback on Sam Alvey at +315. From a betting perspective, I get it. You can't play Ryan Spann straight though at -380. The line's just too wide. If you're going to play a straight bet, it would obviously be on Sam Alvey, but I don't think Sam Alvey's going to win the fight. I think he's going to be outgunned in this fight. I think if anybody scores takedowns, it's going to be Ryan Spann. I think if anyone's going to be more physical against the cage, wasting a little bit of time, running the clock down, I think it's going to be Ryan Spann. I think the striking advantage, I think will probably go to Ryan Spann, maybe not from a technique point of view, but definitely from power. Ryan Spann is a big guy. He hits hard in the division. And if he hits Alvey hard, I think Alvey's going to get knocked out. I think if it goes down to the mat, I think Spann can spend time on top. He is heavy on top. He's got submissions. I think Alvey's outgunned pretty much everywhere. And the only real opportunity that I give Alvey in this fight is the puncher's chance if he does manage to land a shot on Spann that lands flush, because Alvey does hit hard. You can't take that away from him. He's a veteran now, so he's been around the game for a long time, and you can really see that his movement's really slow now. He doesn't really throw too many strikes. He tends to be backed up quite a lot. He's always had that dangerous counter-striking game, and he's still got that dangerous one-punch knockout power, but I just don't see it happening in this fight. I've got Ryan Spann to win this fight all day long. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it. And once again, guys, I'd really appreciate all the likes to the video and subscriptions to our channel too. Just before we go, though, I just want to quickly talk about some great offers that we have on at the minute at MMAPlay365. We understand that some people may be finding life hard financially during these unprecedented times. So for UFC 249, we're giving away free our Dog of the Week. We're currently 7-2 on our Dog of the Week since we launched it at the start of 2020, and all you have to do is use promo code DOG249 at the checkout at MMAPlay365.com. We're also giving you the first month of our monthly subscription for just $1. That's a full month of betting advice just for $1, guys. After that first month, of course, the price will return to the usual $29.99. You don't need to use any promo code for this offer. Just get on to MMAPlay365.com and sign up. And finally, our final offer, you can get 50% off our annual subscription. So for just $150, you'll get a full 12-month subscription to the MMA Play 365 Hub. All you have to do is use the promo code annual150 at the checkout at MMAPlay365.com. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you for the next event.